pissed a lot of people off over the years. And I know that. There's a lot of people that hate you.
That is not an understatement. There is a lot of people that dislike me. Not everything I've done in business was 100% honest.
Correct.
Nor was it the right thing to do.
Right.
All right, everybody, we are doing something different today. Today we are going to be interviewing a reptile smuggler, convicted reptile smuggler, and get his story on things. This is Stephen Baker. You can Google him up. We'll put his picture up here so you can have a good look. So Steve, a lot of people probably think you're a scumbag.
Yeah.
Reading the papers, not getting the correct information, thinking you were just raping the wild and taking all these turtles out. So I guess we're just going to go into it and see what exactly happened and why you did what you did, and go over some of the laws and stuff like that because of it. You screwed us all here in South Carolina.
Yeah, that's my fault.
The laws. All right, so first offense. 2015?
Sentence date was 2015. First offense was 2013. Taking spotted turtles to an individual in Florida.
Okay.
Which turned out to be undercover U.S. Fish and Wildlife agent from another friend that had gotten in trouble and was looking for a way to ease his sentence.
So, like most cases with reptile infractions or animal infractions, or probably drugs too in that case, most incidences are somebody gets busted and then they're willing to give somebody else up for a lesser sentence, and it's almost a chain cycle until
they don't have information unless somebody gives it to them.
Right.
So, they can have a little inkling or an idea, but they're gonna find a player that plays the same game as you, and they're gonna pressure them. And they target like your family or your children. What will your family think? And you can get out of this if you just help us, and we'll talk and this and that. And inevitably, I guess it reduces your sentence. But that was the case with that said individual. He's single, 2 kids, and if I was in a situation, I don't blame him.
And with that one, how long did you end up serving time?
I got 3 years probation for that one, and I made it like 8 months shy of completing my probation before I got indicted again.
So that was a case of mainly, was that a Lacey Act violation?
It was, Lacey Act violation is federal wildlife trafficking.
Okay, yeah, and in case you didn't know, the Lacey Act basically covers animals or animal parts?
Animal parts, pieces, or products made thereof of animals that are protected in the region or home range.
Anywhere in trafficking from one state to another or more?
Over state lines.
So, for instance, let's say you found a sea turtle shell on the beach. Even if you never killed that turtle, you literally just found the shell on the beach. You didn't, and a lot of people don't realize this kind of stuff. So you find a shell on the beach, you take it home because you think it's cool, which it probably would be cool, or even a sea turtle skull or bones. If you were to travel, well, it'd be illegal enough just to have that on you. That's a felony right there. But assuming you took it over state lines and got caught, you could be a felon for life and charged with violation of the Lacey Act. Now, that would be an innocent thing. Obviously, what you did was intentional and
yeah, it was definitely intentional. But even the innocent thing, they will tell you, and they have told me, ignorance is no excuse in the law. It
Correct.
Doesn't matter if you're going to mess with anything, you should know about it.
right.
So,
And a lot of these laws are put into place with the intent of helping wildlife. But as we all know, especially people that deal in the reptile industry, and what is the old saying? The pathway to hell is paved with good intentions. These laws create villains like Steve.
and they also create the market.
Yeah, they create the market because people, whether we like it or not, people are going after and going to collect rare items in this world, whether it's artifacts, whether it's animals or whatnot. You're not going to stop it. It's been around forever. The worst thing you could do is put a ban on a specific animal, and the black market price just shoots up. You know, spotted turtles, for instance, what used to be like a $20 turtle?
No, there actually used to be a $5 turtle. Nobody wanted them. It was $5 when South Carolina, before they had their council meeting, and you know, the head guys up there, you know, Mr. Bennett, decided that we needed a permanent system for South Carolina residents to own these turtles. It wasn't worth the time and effort to go and find them to sell them to someone. You know, you get $3 for a mud turtle that you can find hundreds of, or you can get $5 for a spotted turtle that you gotta walk for hours and hours and hours to find.
And as soon as they put the law, and I remember this back from 2010, 13-ish, as soon as the laws go in place banning the sales of catching and collecting wild spotted turtles, the price of a spotted turtle jumped to sometimes $500 a pop. You know, between $150 to $500 a pop. That is an incentive to a lot of people to start catching something that they would have not normally bothered collecting. And it's the same with these new laws now. You know, instead of allowing citizens to have permits and breed and sell the babies, they're making it to where you're only allowing the poachers to take it all, and they're going to collect even more. Whether, you know, and when you have breeding, and nobody, I'll give you a perfect example. Australia cut off their exporting of animals, I believe, a while back. It's been several, 10, 15 years ago maybe. So people would smuggle animals in here, but the ones that were here with a constant breeding, nobody was smuggling. Nobody is smuggling bearded dragons or, you know, anything like that, because there's so many breeding, and the price goes down, and we got morphs and everything else. There's no need. What I believe it was, I don't want to say his name for other reasons, but there's a guy in the reptile industry everybody knows that loves to use the term conservation through commercialization. And that's the same thing, you know, with a lot of these programs. They have great intentions, but the biggest issue is it all boils down to money. They're destroying their habitat, and that's fine, but you can't collect them and breed them and sell the babies.
And they're destroying their habitat for money.
Exactly.
You know, it's like gopher tortoises, even in Florida. Gopher tortoises are protected, South Carolina, Georgia, they're protected everywhere they're found. Florida has a system for impact fees for construction and development, and they also have an entombing fee. And meaning that, okay, well, we're going to send a biologist out to count how many turtles are here, tortoises are here, and you're going to pay us X and X amount of dollars just to bury them. We're just going to act like they weren't here.
To make a parking lot or
So make a parking lot or whatever. So, and it's all about the money.
Habitat loss is the biggest killer of animals in general. It's not pet trade and people poaching.
It's definitely not pet trade. Orangutans, their habitat is shrinking by the day because of palm oil industry. They're clear cutting, flash burning the jungles that they live and survive in, and planting palm trees for palm oil.
And speaking of captive born, so your next conviction, which you didn't learn for the first time, was in 2018, correct? Or when were you busted?
It was 2017. U.S. Fish and Wildlife showed up at my house basically saying they wanted to inspect and look and see what I had. Kind of an underhanded, oh, we're just here because you're on probation and we can do this. So they came, they looked at all my animals, and then they took from me Reeves turtles, Chinese box turtles, 2 Amazon River turtles, and some Chinese softshell turtles. Now, all those turtles were not turtles that I have gotten, you know, illegally. The Chinese box turtles, majority of them are born right here in the United States. But because of the situation and what they're investigating, it's an Asian turtle that's got to go.
Right.
So, you know, I mean, they didn't tell me that I was under investigation, obviously. They wanted to know what I had. So they can say, okay, well, this guy said that he's doing this, and then there's these animals there. So then it led them to look a little further in because, well, wait a minute, this guy's saying stuff and it's here. So I give them a reason a reasonable doubt, said look further into me.
And then they find boxes in
Boxes.
JFK.
Coming to me, coming to other folks that were also mentioned in my indictment. Again, with the boxes, there is methods and permitting systems for you to do things legally. I just avoided all of those. One, because I was already in trouble for wildlife trafficking. And I don't know if you know, but if you get in trouble for wildlife infractions, you're not eligible for an import or export permit for 5 years.
Correct.
So even if I wanted to do it legally, I couldn't. So it's not saying that I did right. I still am very upfront with what I did was wrong.
Correct.
But I had no other method to do it.
Right. Well, that's another thing. Like, there is a huge difference in a lot of the reptile community and wildlife community in general are going to butt heads over this thing. As when I say butt heads, like there are plenty of people that believe that collection from the wild is okay in moderation. And what I mean by that is there, especially when you have breeding colonies all over the world, you want a different bloodline for certain things. So, if you go out and you catch a few corn snakes, a few box turtles, or whatever it is you're breeding. So if you catch a few pairs, bring them home, most collectors don't have an issue with that. But the new age collectors or reptile hobbyists have an issue with that. But what they don't understand is that, and we're not going to name names or anything like that, because it's not about trying to call people out or anything. It's more of an understanding. The majority of breeders out there, whether it be especially turtles, but whether it be snake breeders, ball python breeders, the majority of these older breeders out there that have huge names all made their money on wild caught animals. Their breeding stock are all wild caught animals. And a lot of these same guys are sitting here talking about conservation, how you shouldn't use wild animals, blah, blah, blah. That's because they've already established their breeding colonies. I know several guys right now that they're breeding a ton of box turtles every year, wood turtles. All their stock was originally wild caught box turtles and all.
But they changed their ways.
They
changed their ways. They turned around from their evil doing and want to do things the right way. But if you ask these people, they will never ever admit to taking animals with a suspicious origin or where they came from. And a lot of times when people buy something from me, they never ask me if I caught it, where I caught it, where I found it.
Right, but they know. They know.
It's kind of an unmentioned thing. You've read about it in certain literature about the best thing to do is just don't tell me any information and don't ask me any questions, because
I get it 100%. But I do agree that there has to be some form, and I get in an argument with another buddy of mine about, he's for laws, heavy laws and all, and I'm anti-government on a big level. And I'm not like, a drug dealer or animal poacher, but the problem is when you put the government involved in things, the likelihood of an educated person writing these laws is slim to none.
and an educated person is just all in the way it's looked at. You can read books on reptiles and amphibians and know everything there is to know about them, but not be able to keep them alive.
Right.
There is a certain level of field experience that a lot of the new guys and the law enforcement people don't have.
Correct. And not just that, we're talking about, recently in South Carolina, they just made it, in case any of you are from South Carolina and don't know this, they put a ban on all sales of native reptiles except for morphs.
And there's a certain size limit on hatchling different snakes and stuff like that.
From what I understand, I don't remember the exact, I probably should have looked it up, but like corn snakes, for instance, is one of the top 5. So you can breed corn snakes, but you have, unless they're morphs, you can sell them any size. But if they're normal corns, you can sell babies up to 24 inches, I think.
I can't even.
Maybe basically it has to be a baby. And I feel like they should have done that with everything. You should sell captive-born babies of any species. That would help.
I agree. In Louisiana, on the turtle farms with the alligator snapping turtles, which is another topic of heat with the propagation of alligator snapping turtles, because they're now classified in how many different subspecies?
I think 4.
4 different subspecies.
More,
but Louisiana, it was one of the top states for turtle soup. So now Louisiana put it in place to obtain a CITES permit to export alligator snappers. They can't be over a certain carapace length. Basically a hatchling, 2 inches, 2.5 inches. Anything over that is deemed not a legal exportable turtle because they think it's coming out of the wild.
Right.
And that works. It works 100%. Look at the alligator populations. Alligators were on the endangered species list, now they're not.
It works until the government, contradicts itself.
Yep.
Because they make laws saying you can only sell hatchlings. Mm-hmm. But then, if I recall, I might be wrong here, but there was a federal law that says you cannot sell any turtle under the 3 inches.
Yeah, 4 inches.
4 inches.
But getting a little deeper into that, the sales with the alligator snapping turtles and turtles in general, the size limit is for export only. When it comes down to domestic turtle sales, you're right, they have to be over 4 inches or for educational or scientific purpose. In other words, a biology teacher or somebody has to purchase it for a classroom to learn from. The little signs that you put up when people are selling turtles and all that does not work because they already know that's baloney. But the size regulations that they put on turtles for export only, we're the only country that has a size on what can be imported and exported.
Right.
And
speaking of going the laws and how poaching reptiles and all, and another thing that people fail to understand about wildlife conservation and how things work. I see a lot of people, and I'm not here to judge on what your belief is, but I'm just going to give you an example of people get mad at canned hunts in Africa. Mm-hmm. Okay, now personally, I would never in my life pay that much money to go kill an old elephant. Mm-hmm. But it's a necessary evil to gain money to protect the young elephants.
And that's another subject that a lot of people touch on, and I got through in that whole mix because the endangered species charge. That's another thing a lot of people don't look at. You look at Madagascar. Madagascar is home to some of the rarest tortoises in the world. They actually eat them. They're such a poor country, they actually eat radiated tortoises, plowshare tortoises, spider tortoises. You can see videos on YouTube everywhere of the native people eating them. And that's fine. I don't have a problem with any person in the world feeding themselves. But again, these people that live in the bush or live in these poverty-stricken countries that collect animals for export to feed and take care of their families, there should be some sort of an exception to this rule of no trade in this, no trade in that. Even in the United States, you have to have a CBW permit, what is it, captive bred wildlife permit for radiated Galapagos.
Yeah.
You got to have a permit saying that you can have a tortoise or a turtle that's not from here, that was obviously not bush raped, put in a box and brought here.
Right.
Because there's registries for the radiators, there's registries for the plowshares, there's registries for a lot of these highly endangered tortoises. I know they're endangered, and yeah, I'm contradicting myself saying that they need to be protected, but there also needs to be a certain level of trade in said animal, because eventually the protection that you're giving them is going to fall short because there's no money to help keep them.
Right, and the reason there also needs to be a system where captive breeding and selling or even collection of a certain number should be allowed is because what was the reason you mentioned the poor people eating the tortoises. One of the reasons people are poaching and all is because of money. You know, in Africa, you know, you got your rhino poachers and all. You think they're going to risk getting shot and killed unless they're trying to feed their families and they're eating.
Exactly.
And I'm definitely not trying to condone all this stuff. Just there has to be some kind of mutual understanding of why things work, whether we like it or not. Things work in a certain way. You know, you can say all day long that criminals are bad, but you have to have a police officer around or in neighborhoods because you know that crime still exists. You know what I mean? That's my point. So when you make laws that ban certain things like spotted turtles or box turtles, a big one here in South Carolina, you are expected the black market to just skyrocket. And right now, I'm not going to get into numbers, but right now I can promise you that the market for eastern box turtles is up there. And especially adults, because people are going to want adults to breed the babies in other states or other countries. And if they just allow the South Carolinians, for instance, or any other state that are native to breed them and sell the captive born babies, you almost defeat in, like, let's say 10, 15 years, the need to collect, because you're establishing, and that's actually why you got into this to begin with. If you want to tell us why you even started collecting.
I mean, it's funny. It's a funny story. I wasn't always in the news for bad things. In 2003, I was shot on the job by a booby trap by an individual named David Tant. I can see his name as public knowledge. You can Google his case. He was the #2 dog fighter in the United States. You might not know his name, but I bet you know the person that he turned in, Michael Vick. I got shot in a utility easement doing a boundary topo for Midwest Vaco. It's a timber company here. I know you guys know what that name is. Yeah. And because it was such a highly publicized event and the circumstances around it, I was labeled unemployable. Nobody would touch me with a 10-foot pole because I got shot on the job by a dog fighter that's questioning why I was there to begin with. Was he there trying to steal dogs? Absolutely not. I was 15 feet from my instrument, you know. So that being said, just like with the other people, I got into this one because I liked reptiles and animals. Then when I got shot, I realized, oh, wait a minute, I can make money selling these things. People want these. So I went from unemployable to self-sustainable, not hurting anyone. I'm not robbing people, I'm not selling drugs, I'm not, you know, and my justification, which does not make it right, I'm not hurting anyone, and I'm still taking care of my kids and my family.
Correct. And, you know, hindsight too, you know, we're sometimes brought in society where not everybody is educated on the consequences of certain things. You know, when you, and I see it every day on Facebook or other places, people killing a rattlesnake, or killing a snake because they think it's a rattlesnake. You know, most people just assume that wildlife is disposable. And to some degree it can be. You know, for instance, we have laws on hunting deer. When it gets overpopulated, we hand out more
Doe tags.
And when it's less populated, we need to repopulate. We hand out less tags. But even with things like that, there are still poachers.
Yep.
And I want to clarify, the only difference between a poacher and somebody collecting legally is literally the law. In South Carolina, for instance, let's say 2 years ago you collected 20 box turtles and sold them out of state, adult box turtles. That was 100% legal. If you do it and not considered poaching. But when you do it, if you were to do it today or the day after the law was enforced, you're a poacher. And it comes across, again, I'm not trying to take up for people raping the wild or anything, but it comes across as derogatory when you're really doing the same action you did the day before, but now the new law is set in place. And another problem is the misinformation with the media. A lot of these people have and government officials too have no idea what they're talking about.
They're notorious for saying anything and everything that goes to Asia is going for food. I've learned from my part in my dealings with certain individuals that I don't know about you, but they weren't spending $25,000 for an albino turtle to eat it.
Right. There's too many poor people up there.
They do, however, eat snapping turtles, red ear sliders, and soft-shell turtles during Chinese New Year. But the more sought-after clientele that these guys are selling to from Hong Kong to other countries, because Hong Kong they use as a hub, are looking at more of a social status, like having a Rolex, a Cadillac, a diamond ring. And in Japan, it's lucky to release turtles. A lot of the guys that I know, especially ones that live in Japan, buy these really expensive turtles and release them because they want good luck on their family.
And another factor that a lot of people don't, and what you said is correct, but also another cultural factor people don't really consider is in Asia in general, anywhere in Asia, you got India, China, Japan, they're extremely overcrowded. Most people in China and Japan, and probably even India, although I don't know too much about India, but I know they got the most population.
Yeah, they got a higher population.
They don't have the luxury of land that we have in America. And when I say land, I don't land and space in general. You know, here a normal pet is a dog or a cat. There, if I can keep a salamander or a small turtle in a little aquarium in my tiny little 9x9 apartment, that's the kind of things. Plus, they kind of mystify, is that a word? Reptiles and amphibians to begin with.
Yeah,
I mean,
that lore and beliefs.
Yeah. So, not that it's right or wrong. I mean, but you know, different cultures believe different things, and
you're right with that. I can say going into a little further than that. Another thing that's big in Asia, as in like Japan and China, is insects. Because they stay in little bitty containers and they don't have the facilities for a dog or a cat.
Right.
And if you got a dog or a cat in China, you're rich.
Yeah. Well, another thing too, and it sounds bad, but it's also they will eat turtles and stuff. I'm not saying they definitely will eat them, but it's not something that you have calibers of things there. You know, it's kind of like here in the United States. You know, you have regular dogs, mutts, adopted dogs. No offense, mutts are good dogs, but if they're mixed, you know what I'm saying. But then you have your high-end breeder dogs, and nobody's using a Tibetan Mastiff, a purebred Tibetan Mastiff, as a bait dog or for a fighting ring. You know what I mean? Yeah. But a lot of people don't consider that thing. A lot of times, Americans, we have this idea in our head about how things are supposed to go. We already categorize people and demonize them for certain things they do when we don't fully understand the whole story. Now, you being a father and trying to feed your family is, by the way, in no way trying to justify.
I didn't justify it.
Yeah, I know. I'm just
That's
saying.
why I said what I did
clear.
was definitely wrong, but you have to go into a little deeper other than he's just greedy, he wants money and don't care about the animals.
Right.
That's not every person that's ever sold an animal they weren't supposed to sell or caught an animal they weren't supposed to sell. You know, not saying that there are not people that do have a disregard for other life other than themselves.
Right.
But with me, I don't consider myself that person that had a disregard for the animal's well-being or for their life, which brings us on to something else about the candy wrappers and the socks, and we'll get into that. But
no, I understand what you're saying, because that he said candy wrappers and socks. When the articles came out, they said you were smuggling directly to China in candy wrappers and socks. Now, I will say this: most people, when they ship turtles, even as cruel as it sounds to people who've never shipped a turtle in their life,
what it is.
As cruel as it sounds, it's actually more beneficial for the turtle to ship a turtle in a sock. And but am I wrong?
You're absolutely right.
And the reason for that is very simple, actually. A turtle will move around, and they have long fingernails, and they scratch each other. If you put them in a sock, they actually calm down, and they're just going to chill there, especially box turtles. They're just going to sit there. They're not going to hurt each other if you shipping more than one. And they're going to, and that's for bigger turtles, obviously. You're not going to do that for little hatchlings.
But for bigger turtles, it's more humane and a better way to ship. And that's not just box turtles, that's any big turtle. You know, you're gonna put them in a bag or something to prevent them from clawing out of the box or clawing, you know what I mean?
It was basically like you said. They were in a sock, which is nothing more than like a snake bag, to prevent them from hurting the other ones in the box, biting one another, cracking each other's shells, because that was another big problem they had with like the Russian tortoises. Bringing them in from overseas, is that they would just stack tons of them inside of a crate and ship them, and when they would get here, there'd be tortoises with cracked shells and just everything from the weight. So putting them in a sock not only relaxed them because they're not stressed out because they're flopping around in a box, but it kept them from hurting each other.
Yeah, and then the candy wrapper. Well, first, you never shipped anything to China.
I never put my hands on a box and wrote a Chinese address and sent it to the post office.
What happened was you were dealing with a middleman in New York.
New York. He was in New York, and he had. I was told he had family in Hong Kong. Now, whether that was actually his family or not, that's still undecided.
Still the same thing, though.
It's still the same thing. I would ship to another person in the United States that would in turn ship overseas.
Okay, and they would ship you
different things like the Amazon River turtles, but color morphs, Indian roof turtles, hatchlings that were, obviously not taken from the wild. They were hatched on a farm somewhere in China.
And you know this, and I've known you for a long time, so you're no stranger to these turtles. They're Latin, everything.
Yeah.
Actually, before we did this, I said, look, you need to use common names, because if you start just labeling off the Latin on these, nobody's going to know. Some people will, but most people won't. And that's what. And you can Google some of these turtles too. Some of them are pretty endangered, some of them not so much. But it's kind of like, I guess anything. The spotted turtle. They make them seem like they're not here, but.
And again, and then that's a little bit different when it comes to like the turtles from overseas that I was getting. You were talking about India and how they're heavily populated and overcrowded. I can understand how an Indian roof turtle and the river systems in India would be just garbage, just everywhere. Pollution. It would be hard for these turtles to survive in the wild. And I understand that completely. But whatever turtles that were originally smuggled from India to Asia are producing viable offspring. Those viable offspring were in turn shipped to me and given to someone else that wanted to produce viable offspring. It's like the Indian spotted pond turtle. They were originally brought in without paperwork, illegally to the United States. And now they're produced by the hundreds. They do really well in captivity. Now, again, those turtles that are in the wild, yes, they need to stay there. Because there's only a handful of Indian roof turtles left in India. But if those go away, and there's no more because of the polluted river systems, because somebody is producing them in Asia, you have a backup plan.
Exactly, and that's why, again, I don't want to mention his name because I don't know how I feel about it, but the whole conservation through commercialization is important. And I know a lot of you are like, oh, that's just greed. No. And we've seen it through with the crocodiles, the gharials, different species around the world where the wild population is gone. And I'll say this too, very rarely, if any, does the wild population disappear because of over collecting.
Yeah.
It's mostly because of habitat loss. And when I say habitat loss, like the rivers he's talking about are not loss of river, but they're polluted to the disgusting extent. And that's the same with not just India, but most places in South America, Africa, because of the poverty levels there are ridiculous, and people just pollute the rivers. And until you fix that, then there really is no fixing anything. So you can blame. And not trying to take the heat off of people poaching, but you can blame that all you want. But the reality is, until you stop habitat loss, once these things are gone, they're gone. I mean,
and unless, like we said, unless there's an established captive population producing viable offspring. which I'll go into this. If you hear a lot of biologists with DNR here talk, or even other states, Florida, they don't want captive animals being produced and released into the wild for the fear of bacterial infections, disease, so forth and so on. Completely understand it. It's
Right.
I can't argue there. But alligators, endangered species list, captive propagation, the farms that collect wild eggs, hatch said wild eggs, raised the hatchlings up to a certain size and released 25% of their hatch. And the other goes towards supplying the demand for alligator meat, leather products, this and that. And now there's so many alligators, it works. The system works. The alligators on the farms have to be given shots and inoculations just like children before they go to school to prevent these diseases and bacteria and things, sicknesses from spreading to wild populations. Veterinarians now are a lot more educated and up to par with the reptile care, so they can prevent different diseases from reaching wild populations if they introduced captive born stock to refurbish the wild population. So now the science is there to make this work.
Yes, the science is there, and I agree that we should have some regulation on animals. I just feel like the biggest opponent we have in the reptile community is one, ourselves, and two, the uneducated politicians that are running the show. And what I mean by uneducated, I'm not saying that you can be a Harvard law student and understand everything in the world about, let's say, finances or whatever it is your craft is, but that doesn't mean you're intelligent or educated
or
on certain other subjects like reptiles. And a perfect example is when they were in the House, when they were debating on whether to pass this law or not, they said this is a reptile and amphibian ban bill from selling. And two people in the South Carolina House of Representatives, one of them said, does this, and this, it says clearly reptile and amphibians. And one of them says, will this cover porcupines?
No, it's a mammal.
Thank you. I mean, that was a third grade question, you know. And then another one said, I'm glad, something to the effect of, I'm glad this is happening or something because I don't want to see this state run with black mambas, which, by the way, is not a native reptile. And I understand, to somebody who's never done that, they might not know that, but you should not be passing or voting in general on a law where you have zero knowledge of what you're passing.
It's just like going to court, and if you go to trial, they say that you have a jury of your peers.
Correct.
A jury of my peers, if I went to trial for my wildlife crimes, I would think would be a panel of people that understand the wildlife trade. Not someone that's been informed by the media or an investigator or anything like that. Because if you look back, I'm going to bring up Steve Irwin, for instance. Before Steve Irwin died, these animals are wonderful. They're venomous, they're deadly, but they're beautiful. You need to learn about them. You need to get up close to them. You need to see them so you don't fear them. Everything's through conservation. Yes, I'm going to go out and catch these crocodiles, but I'm going to make new ones with them. Yes, I'm going to get this turtle, but I'm going to make new ones with them. After he died, now it's all python, this, deadly reptile, that's, when snake attacks, when, so it's all negative publicity now when it comes to wildlife. And it's not just a person keeping wildlife.
Right.
The tegus that Florida banned, I know the person that was releasing them. Matter of fact, he was on an episode of Nat Geo Wild where they had the investigator come out to his house and give him a fine for releasing tegus. But again, I'm with you with the permitting. I completely agree with permitting and policing the industry as far as keepers. The system I feel comfortable with. If you're going to keep a black mamba, you need to have the proper procedure down to keep it. You need the proper caging. You need the proper information if you get bit, You need the proper veterinarian care if it gets sick, and that's just simple. I mean, because if you spend the money to buy an expensive imported or bred mamba or anything, you're not going to want to let it get escape anyway.
Right.
So those regulations that would have benefited everybody wouldn't have hurt the people that want to do it.
Right,
Wanna
and,
do it
and
right.
you know, and that's just with any animal too. Like there are scumbags out there. There are definitely scumbags out there. But and accidents do happen. Nobody wants their dog to get lost and then go bite somebody. Nobody's like wanting that. So it's accidents happen and people make mistakes for sure. But and I'm not even saying you should be held responsible if you have a venomous snake and it gets loose and bites somebody. Then you should technically be held responsible.
It's the same thing if your dog gets out.
Right.
You're responsible.
But you know, I just feel like sometimes we go overboard with the regulations and the laws. But I can't imagine how many people are affected by the law in South Carolina now.
Well, it's not just and it's even the not even just a pet owner level. It's that was their business. You have legitimate breeders that breed, different corn snakes, different king snakes. They have no intentions of ever collecting a wild snake ever. They bought all these snakes or lizards and turtles legally, spent the time to raise them up to breeding size. Now they're gonna be felons if they sell their offspring.
Yep.
So-
Especially and again, if you've never bred snakes and you don't really know much about the breeding of like morphs and stuff, one thing to mention is, let's say you even have albinos of something. So the morphs are fine to sell. Only certain species are you allowed to sell babies of. So let's say it's Eastern dimecroral snakes. There are morphs of those. But that's not on the list of selling the babies under a certain inches. You cannot sell the babies unless it's a morph. Well, genetically, when you breed albinos or a het albino, the babies are not going to come out all albino. So you're going to be stuck with, let's say, 10 normal-looking babies, although they're het for albino. But you can't prove that, which I understand. You can't prove that, but
I mean, you could technically get the DNA done to show that this snake is related to this snake through genetics, but financially, that's unrealistic.
well, plus the law doesn't say. It says visual.
Visual
So
morphs.
even if you had that proof, it wouldn't matter.
Yep.
Because it's not visual. It has to be a visual. And visual morph means it.
You have to look at it and see that
Yes,
it's
that it
different.
is a different snake. Whether it's albino, that's an example, probably the most common example. But and it could be, ball pythons are a million freaking things. But yeah, so I think it's gonna wrap it up. But man, I appreciate you coming over to talking. People are gonna have their own opinion of whether Steve is a scumbag or not. Personally, I've known the guy for a long time, and I'm not gonna sit here and condone anything he's done.
I also didn't tell you what I was doing either.
Well, that's true too. But I knew when he got busted.
Yeah.
But I knew exactly when that happened. But twice. And other people around here too. It's not just you. It's several other people in South Carolina. And trust me when I say this, and I'm not trying to cast stones at the reptile industry, but I would say the majority of the reptile industry skirts a line.
Yep, a very thin line.
A very thin line there. When I say very thin line, I mean like technically taking a Burmese python over state lines is a felony. So if you were in South Carolina and you moved to Georgia with your python, that's a felony because that's a violation of the Lacey Act.
Yep.
So there's a lot of rules out there. Don't always judge a book by its cover. Sometimes people are wrongly convicted of, or the paperwork was wrong, as we know with somebody recently. They weren't trying to break laws. And then sometimes you got people that were intentionally, like Steve, trying to break the, not trying to break, well, intentionally breaking the law for own, well, technically, I guess, selfish reasons.
Selfish reasons. I was taking care of mine. That's
Yeah, or or maybe you wanted something that, and you just gotta, you got to do it the right way, or the government's going to lock you up. But
I mean, it's just like you did hit a value point in that. I wanted things to keep that I, under any other circumstance, could not afford.
correct.
So
You're
Yes.
wanting it for the love of reptiles, but you're selfish as far as how you go about it.
how I went about it was very selfish.
Look, I know, been there with all kinds of things in life, and I know a ton of other people that have been there too. But yeah, and again, you judge for yourself whether Steve is a good person or not. I'm glad you came out and at least acknowledged you're wrong.
Yep.
You know, and hopefully other people will learn from it, because that's the biggest key. You could be a beacon of conservation by teaching people what to do right and how it should be done, because you know, I know you know what you're talking about. I know you've been, and you've pissed a lot of people off over the years, and I know that. There's a lot of people that hate you.
That is not an understatement. There is a lot of people that dislike me. Not everything I've done in business was 100% honest.
Correct.
Nor was it the right thing to do.
Right.
If anybody has any questions, they can put it down in your comments.
Yeah, comments, questions. You know, if you have any questions too about the laws, too, let us know, because and I'm no expert by any means in the laws, but I kind of know how some of the Lacey Act works, and you know, state laws specifically.
And if you Google those laws, you can't hardly find anything.
Yeah,
about it.
it's very hard to look. I mean, to be honest, you almost have to be a lawyer sometimes to look at these laws and figure out what's going on. But yeah, so it was good having you, man.
I appreciate it.
Hopefully some people learn from something, and Google Steve, you might be shocked. But anyway, like and subscribe. Thank you.
Right.